Ukraine, France, Miami, Argentina. Oh, that's great. New Jersey, California, that's where I am. Siberia, nice. Everywhere. Iran, welcome. Peru, Qatar, Romania. Wow, we're just going around the world right now. Thank you. All right, well, I think we can start. It's 9 a.m., so we get this party started, as we say here in the States. So I just wanted to make sure that I welcome you all to this webinar that we are putting together, and the title is New Standards, New Ideas, New Opportunities, and it's featuring our author, Rob Jenkins, today. And my name is Dalia Bravo, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager for the United States. And today I will be facilitating and supporting Rob during this webinar. This webinar, I want to make sure that it is a US focus, and it will help those of you who want to learn the commonalities for the US standards and how to fit the standards into your curriculum. And so let me introduce Rob Jenkins. I'm sure some of you have attended some of the past webinars that he has facilitated. And so I just wanted to
Yes, I'm glad to see you all. Or I guess I don't see you, but I'm glad that you're here, and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about standards. And um, uh, I think this is a really important topic. You know, the world today is getting really busy. I I'm not sure that you're seeing me. I'm going to click out and click back in. See if we can get some action there. Okay, I think we're okay now. So as we go along, I'll be asking you some questions and giving you an opportunity to respond on the chat. I also want you to know that you're welcome to email me. Um, I think we're going to have a couple hundred here. So if you all email me today, I may not get answered to all of them, but usually I'm pretty quick at answering your email. So if you have questions for me or anything that you'd like to know, my email is right there on the screen, Jenkins underscore Rob at sac.edu. And I'd be happy to talk to you about whatever. And if you're out in the area and you want to come visit me, you're welcome to do that too if you happen to be around Disneyland. Um, I know many of you are from out of the country. Um, these standards we're going to talk about today are really um, are really American focused. There's a lot of standards going on all over the world, and it's becoming a very important topic. And we're going to be talking specifically about standards for adult education. That's our programs that lead to college and to the workplace. And we have them all over the United States, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. So we'll talk a little bit about why we have standards, um, and especially about common threads. You know, one of the things that is important to me is that I'm a coordinator. I teach, and I'm also a coordinator over a lot of students or a lot of teachers. We have well over 300 teachers between the two schools, our sister school and ours, and about 150 from my school. And uh, I'm in charge of professional development and helping the teachers understand about the new standards that are out, which are college career readiness standards in English language proficiency standards, but there's a lot more to it than that. And I have time to study out all those things. I can look at the different standards. I can look at college and career readiness standards, and can I can study every little point about them. I know a lot about it as I produced our third edition of Stand Out, and I can I can I do a lot of studying and understand how to do it. But a lot of our teachers are rank and file teachers. They're going from school to school, maybe 2 or 3 jobs, part-time jobs that they have, and they're going from place to place. We call them in California freeway flyers, and they're running from one place to the next and doing their work, and they do a great job. But sometimes they get overwhelmed with, oh, another set of standards. What am I going to do with these standards? How am I going to use these standards? So my job today is to step back just a little bit from all the details and talk about how they all work together, why they're important. It's my contention that we shouldn't be throwing away standards. Oh, here, we're not going to do these standards anymore, so we can do these. I think that they're adding to one another. They're building. So the standards movement has actually created better teachers, and we'll talk about how all that works. So again, I won't. There are a lot of you here. We're now up to 161, and many of you may have questions. It's very hard to do this and the chat room when there's so many people on, but Dahlia will be there too. So if you have any questions, a lot of times she can answer your questions, or you can email me later. Okay, so we're going to be talking about standards and the common threads, and then what we can do in a general way, in a broader perspective, to meet the standards. Of course, I would encourage all of you to go online, find out about these standards in detail. This webinar will be recorded, so you'll be able to, or is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it at another time if you want to come back to it. But if you search out these standards, you can learn a lot and you can get the details, and that's really, really important for you to do. But to give you a broader perspective so you understand, okay, what is it about and how can I apply them today? Do I need to understand them all and every detail to apply them today? And my answer is no. And so I don't want you to be overwhelmed. I want to make this easy for you. So that's our goal, to make this a little bit easier for you to understand these particular adult education standards. So why educational standards at all? Well, the biggest issue, the reason that a lot of people are asking for standards is for accountability and for making our programs more common so that students can, from one place to another, have the same standards throughout the United States. It's to help our students reach their goals. And I think this is more important than just to make everything standard. It really is to allow us to be better teachers. It helps us to focus on what evidence, what research shows is more important, and what best practices show are important and essential things to teach to our students, and what our students, how our students can be more successful. So we are leading our students. We are not in a classroom just to get a paycheck, as all of you know. You're here because you want to learn more, and that's important. We are in the classroom because we want our students to be successful. But we really can't stop at thinking, oh, they're only going to be successful for my class. We want them to be successful throughout. So throughout their lives, we want them to be lifelong learners. How do we do that? The standards can help us. We can challenge our students. We have a target, and we can help our students transition to the workplace, or just being better parents and civic responsible. So there's a lot of different things that we can do, and the standards will help us do it. So I'm missing a graphic here, but this graphic has 4 elements to it, and it's a basic graphic that says communication, critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration. Dahlia, if you could pull the poll up, we're going to ask you to do a poll, and what I'd like you to do is just quickly respond to this poll. What do you think is the most important characteristic of good ESL instruction? Of those, why don't you click on one, and we'll just give you a couple minutes to be able to do that. As you're doing this, I know it's difficult to choose just one, but you only can choose one. So what do you think is the most important? And these particular areas, you would be surprised to know, maybe some of you would be surprised to know, if you haven't been in education a long time, that a lot of these are are different than what, say, 100 years ago in teaching English. Relevant instruction wasn't important. For some, we did have the grammar translation method and people could read what they want, but collaborative activities, no, there was a teacher standing up in front of the class teaching. Critical thinking, no, it was filling in the blanks and just exercises in grammar. And creativity, well, that was something for another class, but not for English class. So it's interesting to see we have 44% say critical thinking. And critical thinking, it's interesting that you say that, because critical thinking is like one of the #1 things that everybody is talking about. But I think you'll all agree that all 4 of these things are very important characteristics. So So we're going to move on. Thank you, Dahlia, for that. We're going to move on, but I wanted you to think about this a little bit, and we're going to look at the verbiage of one of the standards right now. This is 21st century skills, and they say learning and innovation skills are the skills that separate students who are prepared for increasingly complex life and work environments in the 21st century. A focus on creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration is essential to prepare students for the future. So even if you don't know the 21st century skills and don't know where they are, you could be incorporating them in. I'm sure most of you are incorporating them in the classroom right now because you have a level of creativity, asking students to create things and do things, critical thinking, communication, of course, and collaboration. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but what I think is important is all of these things have happened because of the way standards have been introduced. Standards have given us a reason to move forward in how we approach instruction, so that we start looking at that and find that students learn better with using these four principles. For example, when we're talking about 21st century skills, there's more. There's college and career readiness standards. Those are fairly new. They came from the Common Core, and they're for adult education. And they ask us to increase rigor. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about rigor in a minute. But basically, rigor, we're talking about complex text with academic language. So the complexity is becoming more and more important. We are asking for students to find evidence for their responses and not just give them yes, no questions and answers, but saying, hey, why do you say this? How do you know that this is what the answer is to this question? How do you come to this conclusion? So these are really important. Building knowledge through content-rich nonfiction is the third thing. And there's content-rich nonfiction. When students are learning important information about their lives, relevant information about their lives, they are becoming more and more, they're relating more and more to the instruction, and it becomes more important to them, and they remember more. CCR stands for College and Career Readiness Standards. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a little bit, but that's very important, comes from the Common Core. I just was reading the chat and I answered that question for you. There's also English Language Proficiency Standards, ELP or ELPS, and the ELPs allow us to make more relevant those specific college and career readiness standards. They make them relevant to the classroom, help us to be able to produce or use them and the strategies we need to be able to do that in the classroom. The important concept, I think, of English language proficiency standards is that they provide a kind of scaffolding, a building up to help the students to be able to prepare them to be able to do the more complex things that we're talking about when we talk about increased rigor. So you don't need to remember anything yet. I just wanted to give you an introduction to some of those, and we can look at them in a slightly different way. I've divided them up, and I'm sure other people, there's a lot of very smart and intelligent people talking about standards here in the United States, and they may divide it up in a different way. This is kind of where we are with the different types of ways that we can look at standards. And of course, there's other standards. These all apply to adult education, but some of them apply also to K-12 and other programs. So just be aware of that. I want you to think about the 21st century skills, and all of these things can apply to all levels of instruction, whether or not it's university or it's elementary school. So think about these and how you're using the concepts that we'll be talking about today in your class. All right, so SCANS is the Secretaries Commission on Achieving Necessary Skills. This is a pretty old standard. This is from 1991, I think. And these standards relate to soft skills and workplace skills that students have. In fact, they were introduced as a workplace, and a lot of the a lot of the publishers began to say, hey, we have scans. Look at our workplace unit in our book, which was one of 8 or 12 units. And they said, we have scans, yippee. But that really wasn't enough because, in my view, and Standout came out right after the scans were introduced, or late after the scans were introduced, before EFF. And uh, what I wanted to mention was that Standout was saying scans apply to all disciplines and not just to the workplace unit in a book. But because of the idea that people were thinking of, I think anyway, that scans led to EFF, which is almost the same as scans, except for it applies to all disciplines. So again, these are the soft skills like interpersonal skills. Can the students communicate? Can they work together in a team? Those type of skills are very important everywhere, whether it's not workplace or it's academic or another place. So think about those as we go through these. They may be older, but I would never throw the baby out with the bathwater. I would say, hey, we're really adding to these standards. So we started with scans in 1991, 1998 came EFF, turn of the century came the 21st century skills, and now we have something called the Employability Skills Framework. And you can learn a lot from these websites if you go to the websites, and you can do that by searching on Google, and you can find their websites and study about it. And I think that would be very useful. So think about that as we go along. There's now the academic ones and the content ones, the ones that are saying, okay, students should be able to do a paragraph this way. They should be able to read a text and pull out information about the author's intentions. Those type of skills are academic skills, and those are the ones that are most recent: College and Career Readiness Standards and the English Language Proficiency Standards. There's also some little known standards that people may not realize are in the CASAS. There's CASAS content standards. We won't talk about that today, but I wanted to let you know that you can go online and you can find those CASAS content standards. Those are very specific standards that are useful for people writing curriculum and ideas to produce what kind of things can be done. A lot of people don't know about those standards, but I think they're very important because CASAS relates to the NRS, the National Reporting System, and that has the level descriptors, which CASAS also has, and those level descriptors are very similar, talking about what level is beginning low, beginning high, and etc. We're not going to talk about level descriptors today. We're going to talk specifically about the SCANs, EFF, 21st Century Skills, Employability Skills, CCRs, and ELPSs. But I wanted you to get an idea about these as we go. So let's go ahead and get started with these. Here is a chart that shows SCANs, EFF, 21st Century Skills, Employability Skills, the big topics. And as you look at this, I'd like you to see if you think that there's any commonality. Remember, they kind of build on each other, so they're kind of helping one another to build this newer framework, but they all have stuff in common. So instead of thinking, okay, we're getting rid of SCANs and now we're going to EFF. We're getting rid of EFF, now we're going to 21st century. Look at these skills. Do you see anything that they have in common? Okay, so Roxana said critical thinking, good. Other ideas? Go ahead and type that in your chat. What are some things? Interpersonal skills. Yes, collaboration could be interpersonal skills. So even 21st century has that. Communication, obviously, is really important. So those are 3 areas that are common. But technology, yes, we saw that too. There's a lot of technology in all of them, and you know that technology has advanced a lot. Information, managing information. What I'd like you to notice on all of these as you're putting them down, think about how they interrelate. You could really group these into even smaller categories. When you're collaborating, you're communicating. When you're collaborating, you're managing information. When you're using technology, you're using media. Your systems in SCAN means that you understand systems. Systems include technology. You have resources. All of it is lifelong learning. They all kind of interrelate, but let's just take one and look at that quickly. So my point in showing you this is not that you need to memorize all of this, but I want to show you that if you're doing, there's a lot of things you're already doing, and you're meeting these standards in lots of ways from a larger perspective. Okay, so let's look at this for a minute. Let's talk about communication. How has communication changed over the years? How has it become different? And was it always, oh yeah, we just want people talking to one another? Well, here's an example in Standout of something that we market as conversation, but it's really not true conversation. Okay, real communication, it goes beyond a dialogue. But years ago, that's what it was. You speak this, we call it the que tal Paco method, the audiolingual method. And you would practice and practice and practice these dialogues forever. And that would be the end of instruction. They're still important. Dialogues are important. We can't get away from that because the students need an opportunity to practice before they use real communication. That's scaffolding. Scaffolding means a structure that helps you prepare for another structure. So this is an opportunity for students to build their communication skills and build up to the next next type of activity. So if we look, here's our dialogue, and our students may replace things. This is a substitution dialogue. Do we need any milk at the store? Yes, we need some milk, and they can replace that with different types of words and different types of containers in this for this model. But real communication, this is a couple pages later in the same lesson. Real communication is when students improvise with the language. I'm a jazz musician on the side, just nothing great, but I love improvisation, and I realize there's a really great connection between the music the music that I play and the jazz I play, and real communication. We could play scales all day, we could practice over and over, but until you allow the musician to play what he's feeling and thinking and improvising, it's not jazz. Jazz is not scales. Jazz is music that you create from information that you have, and that's the same with communication. It's this type of creativity that the students need to use. So here in Standout, we say you are planning a party for 20 people in a group. Make a shopping list on a separate piece of paper. Those students are going to have to work together. They're going to have to communicate information. They're going to have to decide how many people, how much of each product they're going to need to buy. They're going to have to consider the price. There's other things they do. That's real communication. Nobody's giving them the information. So that's one idea here. So we've talked about communication. What's another one that you guys mentioned? You mentioned interpersonal skills, collaboration and interpersonal skills. What's the history by that with that? Did we always have students collaborating in the classroom? That's an interesting concept to think about because really in a lot of programs that wasn't happening. There was group work, and don't be confused that group work in itself is not collaboration. Collaboration is when students are working together to achieve something, and that's what's important. We know that through research and evidence-based research and best practices and from our experiences, we know that students learn better when they collaborate. So let's talk about what that means. Again, we can scaffold and we can help them to talk to one another in guided practice, or we can have them like in a dialogue, or we can have them collaborate, not collaborate, but work in a group. This is not collaboration, but this is in Standout, and it's a good way to scaffold towards something more. So we get in a group and we say, what's your name? What's your name? How old are you? Or maybe we wouldn't ask that question. Where are you from? And then in a group we could ask, what kind of home do you have? Do you live in? Is your home large or small? and just pass information back and forth. Although that can be considered communication, it's really not collaboration. They're not trying to achieve something. So what has changed because of standards? These things have changed. We have added collaboration. Don't stop at just communicating in a group. Add more to it. Add collaboration. And when you do that, you're adding critical thinking and other things. So the students have to work together to achieve something, whether or not it's a product or it's just a solution or a decision. They work together to figure out how they can achieve those things. Again, if you're collaborating, you're doing standards. You're meeting some of the standards. If your students are collaborating, have them work out problems. They can do it. This challenge, it may be challenging at first if you haven't done that, but it's very important that you remember that real collaboration is not just getting in groups, but it's solving problems. What's nice about solving a lot of problems is that they can be open-ended, which means students can have any answer, the groups can come up with any conclusion, and those conclusions are all acceptable. What a great confidence builder that is. The ultimate in collaboration would be project-based learning, PBL we call it. You can also, it's closely related to problem-based learning, also PBL. And this is the ultimate in collaboration, where students work on a project together that may last a day or two, a simulation, for example. Here's an example. This is a team project. Project-based learning can take a whole semester. You can spend a whole semester creating like a bookstore, for example, and the students can run the bookstore. It could be a lot of things. These team projects that we have in Standout are very basic. They take the information that the students learn for a whole unit and they use it. You don't have to use this in Standout. You can create your own on this, but these are projects that students can make. So here, this one, they break up into groups, and in teams they become families, and they have to plan a meal or a series of meals for a week, and everybody has to come to the same conclusions, and this is really, really good. So students will be able to get a lot out of it, and they will begin to have more confidence. When we talk about the 4 C's, which critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creative thinking, I always like to say that there's one C that's greater than all of those, and those all lead to it, and that's confidence. When our students gain confidence, they will do better. They do a presentation in front of the class when they finish this project, and we do this every couple of weeks. We have students do a project. Now with technology, they're doing projects with PowerPoints. They're doing projects where they have to research online. There's so many possibilities. You can do projects whether you're using Standard or not. You can use projects all throughout. So think about that as we move forward. They can be really fun, as Gabriel just said. Absolutely. They are fun, and I love it. And if you have a product at the end, you can share those products and people see them. Okay, we're going to take another commonality that you all mentioned, and that was thinking, critical thinking, critical thinking. Every place you go they're talking about critical thinking. What is this critical thinking? Why is it important? Let's do a little activity real quickly. So this, if you can see it, if you've got a big enough screen, you should be able to see this. This is an activity that we do that demonstrates some critical thinking. If you were in a group, you don't have to do this in a group, it's still critical thinking, but it's nice to do it in a group because it adds an extra dimension where you're asking for the students in the group to come to consensus. But you would look after studying nutrition, maybe you had my food plate, or you had the pyramids, or some other way to talk about nutrition. Your students would take that information and then look at this. This nutrition that these 5 people have isn't all that great, but it is relevant because it's what a lot of people eat. Maybe not you guys, but a lot of us do not have good nutrition. So let's look at these, and I want you to just take a second. And we would ordinarily rank these 1 through 5, who has the most and the best nutrition and the least best nutrition. And you would pick this out, and you'd work as a team and try to work it out. And what you'll find is that every team, every group of 4 in your class, everybody's going to have different answers, and that's great. So let's just see what you think. Who has the best nutrition? So I hear Rosa. I've got 2 for Rosa. It looks like we've got a lot for Rosa. Rosa. Well, you guys think Rosa's great. Okay, who has the worst nutrition? Let's go that way. Since Rosa, Ferdinand. Gabriel. Okay, so now we have a few other decisions. Me. That's a good answer. Yes, I think maybe I have the worst nutrition too. Unless peanut butter is nutritious. All right. A lot of you are saying Gabriel now. Some of you said Ferdinand. Okay. Or Fernando. I'm sorry. Okay. So you can imagine your students doing this. Does that include communication as they're talking together and deciding who has the best nutrition? Does that involve collaboration as the students are trying to work out and coming up with a decision, an end result, when they come up with a consensus? It includes all of those things. And some students may come up with other ideas beyond what's here, which would be creativity too. So critical thinking is essential. But I don't know if we can all agree. I'd like to think that we can all agree on what critical thinking is. You know, for years, I was talking about critical thinking. I've been talking about it for the last 20 years. And I hear a lot of different people saying a lot of different things. For example, I'll hear people tell me, and they'll email me and say, you can't do critical thinking at the low levels. Of course you can. But you need to recognize that the students need different types of support when you're doing critical thinking at the lower levels. You can do it. We have Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy, it has been important for many years. Most of you know about it. If you don't, search it. But Bloom's taxonomy is a great thing. It gives you a verb and it gives you examples and it has stages of. But I'm not so sure I agree that they're stages. And in fact, the new Webb's depth of knowledge, DOK, you can look that up. Webb's depth of knowledge suggests that they really are interrelated, and you don't have to wait for a higher level to do the higher level critical thinking skill. You can do it at every level in ESL, every level at EFL. So think about that as we talk a little bit about it. Now, here's my question. If I wanted to have what I'm asking you to do is I would like you to come up with a guiding principle, and we only have a couple minutes to do this. So just write any task that. Critical thinking is any task that. So when you're in your classroom, let me explain it before you get going. When you're in your classroom, you're doing an activity, ask yourself, is this critical thinking or not? And so instead of thinking about the examples, analyze and evaluate and apply, don't think of those. Think about, how do I know my students are really engaged in critical thinking? So this is the definition, or this is what I'd like you to come up with, a guiding principle. Critical thinking, you don't have to type this, is any task that, now complete it for me, okay? The students have to infer, predict, make decisions. That was one, Lola, thank you. Any task that makes students think. Yep, good. Sylvia says when they can answer the why of any question. Excellent. A few more. When they ask questions. Good. Critical thinking is like basic one nowadays while studying. Okay. When we see students work and engage, verbalize their ideas and how to solve a problem. Critical thinking is any task that allows my students to apply whatever learning to real life, what they are learning to real life situations. Okay, so those are great. There's a lot more. I have one. It's a super basic. Yours are great, and I love basic. We call this a refrigerator note. So a lot of us put magnets on our refrigerators. We have in my case, grandchildren's pictures and things like that. But also we can have on there a magnet that holds our critical thinking principle. I'm sorry, I pushed the wrong button. Here we go. So write a one-sentence guiding principle of critical thinking in the classroom. Start with tasks. Okay, and here's mine. I'm sorry, I should have clicked on that earlier. Tasks that require learners to think deeper than the superficial vocabulary and meaning. What does this mean? What I'm saying is, even at the lowest levels, we're talking about vegetables and fruit. Have them classify vegetables and fruit. So we're talking about all the produce, and we ask them to classify it into two columns, one for vegetable, one for fruit, or one for sweet and one for sour, or different colors. There's all sorts of things we can do. We can classify. That's one example. We already saw example of ranking. So instead of just looking and saying, look at these, look at the nutrition of these people, we're saying, how is that nutrition? What can we do uh, to make it more critical thinking aspects? Is to say, hey, rank it, put it in some sort of order. So these are things that we can do. At the higher levels, we can be reading a text. And as we read the paragraph or a text or a longer story, we can ask, what was the author's intent? We can ask questions like, instead of just saying, what is the name of the person that did this activity, we can ask, well, what was he thinking? How was he doing that? Why do you think he said that? So we can ask different questions that make us go deeper than the superficial vocabulary and meaning. Um, so yes, and somebody said, Lola said this is a way to help students use and expand their vocabulary. Absolutely. What you find is when you get the students more engaged with learner-centered instruction, students will be doing uh, things that instead of just listening to you, in fact, you don't have to do a lot of talking. They will do it for you. They will have a lot of information. In fact, I always say when I present new information to my students that 80%, and this is not statistical really, this is just my impression, about 80% of what I want to teach the students collectively they know. So if I can pull the information out from students, pull the vocabulary out, pull the thoughts out, it's that much more motivating, that much more interesting. So think about that as we go. And yes, as we incorporate student-centered instruction or learner-centered instruction, motivation does increase. Thank you. Okay, so here's a few activities you can do to incorporate critical thinking. And I think it's important that you think about, you're going to see charts and graphs. You're going to see classifying. We talked about that, putting things in columns. Collaborating over a problem, comparing, using Venn diagrams, the Johari squares, charts, defining concepts, evaluating information with a rubric, individually solving problems as well as in groups when you're collaborating, predicting outcomes, ranking, reaching consensus, summarizing concepts. All of these learner-centered instruction ideas will help your students be more engaged. And you ask yourself, are my students engaged? Are they using critical thinking? And then, well, maybe not so much. So maybe I need to add an activity like one of these. And so I keep these activities in the forefront of my mind as I'm teaching, and I think all of us do that. Sometimes say, this class is getting boring for me. Maybe it's boring for the students as you've seen someone yawn or someone. Uh, Fade off into some other, into their phone or something else. What can we do? We just incorporate right there on on the spot. Make a Venn diagram. Do ask them to predict something. Have them rank some ideas, analyze within the context, of course, but it'll make it more interesting, more meaningful, and more memorable. So if you do that, students will learn more. We know that this because best practices suggest that this really works. So think about that. So those are ideas. You're going to see ideas like this all through materials that you have, but you can incorporate these, and they can be simple and basic, or they can be more complicated, whether it's classifying or it's Venn diagrams or charts. Even very complicated ones like the one here. They can be very complicated or very simple, but when the students are engaged, they can get a lot of things done. So that's important. Okay, so back to standards. We've been talking about standards. We talked about scans, EFF just a little bit, but especially we talked about how all of them relate. And we talked about within there critical thinking. If you incorporate critical thinking, if you